Welcome to Get Organized at Work. I'm your host, Kayla Fahey-Ahrndt, healthcare leader, mom of three, and your go-to guide for ditching the chaos and taking control of your workday. This is the show where we turn overwhelming to-do lists into clear, actionable plans so you can crush your goals and show up as your best self at work and in your life. Whether you're here for strategies to stay ahead or systems to simplify your workday, you're in the right place. Let's get organized, have some fun, and make this year your best year in your career yet. Let's dive in. Hello, and welcome to the Get Organized at Work podcast. I'm Kayla, I'm your host, and today we're going to be talking about how to drive culture change and innovation and think bigger in our organizations. So as leaders, as professionals, I think it is our job to help us elevate our team to think differently and to drive the culture that we all need and that we all desire. So just to check in with you all, I hope you're doing well. Today I'm a little bit under the weather. I'm pretty sure I had the flu and I'm just working through it. But hey, the podcast must go on. I just wanted to say I'm really excited that in the community last week, we had our first live webinar for 2025. It was all on project management and creating an active project list as well as a project roadmap. There's a brand new template in the community. It's in Excel, so it's fully editable with conditional formatting. I'm super excited about that. So if you want that, definitely join the community if you haven't already. The community is free. It's just a way to carry on the conversation of the podcast outside of the podcast so we can actually meet and you can get more value from me and the rest of our leaders and professionals that have joined. I just wanted to take a minute and share some of the leadership positions that of the people that are in the community. So we have lab supervisor, PT manager at an outpatient clinic, volunteer experience manager and a nonprofit, regional VP HR and healthcare, web designer, CEO, team lead, CTO, technical leader, director of development, education, fundraising, executive, team leader, nurse manager, program manager in healthcare, regional VP HR healthcare, allied health team leader, healthcare level first operational manager, emergency response at a health district, team lead healthcare, work at a bank but in leadership, card fraud operations manager, human resource manager, health professional and an entrepreneur, senior director at operations and healthcare, ANO, director of operations, financial advisor practice, installation coordinator, senior practice coordinator, VP of operations, administrative assistant, bookkeeper, new business owner, etc. There's a wide variety of professions in here, but we're all professionals and leaders. So I just wanted you to know that. Later, I'll share some of the things that everybody wants to work on this year, but it's what you would think based on this podcast: being organized, time management, leader standard work, delegation, planning, ways to succeed as leaders. And one of the desires was to how to lead a culture shift or culture change in an organization. So that's what I want to cover today. So let's get down to the episode. So we're going to talk about why culture change and innovation matters in leadership and why leaders who think bigger can create high performing and forward thinking teams. And just speaking from experience, I'm going to share with you some of my specific stories, personal stories about how I've had to create and drive different culture change and innovation over the years. But I will just say that I think the biggest thing that we can do as leaders when we're trying to form a culture or a culture change, it's often getting people out of survival mode and into a growth mindset. Because what I find is when there's a need for culture change or shift, it's when we're most uncomfortable. That usually happens when something big or different or new or maybe a little bit scary happens. And so it's your job as the leader to sort of ground and reframe. So that's what we're going to talk about. Some of my personal stories from my leadership journey are going to include, you've heard about it, my computer upgrades, the COVID-19 crisis, and getting convalescent plasma in our hospital system, going through blood shortages, and most recently, which I'm going through right now, is dealing with a ransomware attack on the blood supplier that supplies our health system. So I thought it'd be okay to talk about it since they've posted it publicly on their website and it's a big deal. And I'm leading my healthcare system through that right now. So part one, we're going to be talking about the leadership mindset shift, how to think bigger and how it starts with you. So number one, first thing you got to do in a culture change or shift is to start extending trust and letting others step up. Leaders often take too much on themselves instead of empowering their team to step up. So the shift goes from, I'll handle it, to questions like, who can take this on. So ask yourself, what opportunities am I holding back from my team by trying to control everything? We've all been there, right? A crisis is happening, or you feel bad because your team says, oh my gosh, I have so much to do. Things are crazy. And you're like, you know what? I can take care of that. And before you know it, you've got a list of like small tasks which add up, and you go to do them and you're like, wait a minute, I'm not even connected in the way that these frontline leaders are. I really should have had them do this instead of taking it on. It's really stepping back and saying, wait a minute, am I just trying to control things or make it so that they don't have to suffer, quote unquote, through this? But some of the things that they need to do are going to help them take accountability and have autonomy and feel like they can control something in this new culture shift crisis or time of fear or change. So we don't want to take that away from them. So what you can do, some practical steps or tips would be to identify one or two tasks or decisions this week that you've maybe taken on that you can delegate. And when a challenge arises, instead of jumping in, I would just encourage you to pause and then ask your team, how do you think we should solve this? Just speaking from experience, I'm more of a democratic type of leader where I like to source everyone's feedback and then make a decision. And there's a time and place for that. There's also a time and place for more authoritative leadership where it's like, okay, there's a fire. We need to get out. This is a way out. And I think most of the time it can be democratic or maybe somewhere in the middle. I think during crisis, people are often hoping that you will just tell them what to do. But I think to grow through things, a little bit of uncomfortableness is okay. But I would just make sure that you're never leaving them hanging and that you're also being really direct or explicit about what you're doing. So you might say, hey, my intention is to not just make decisions based on blindly hoping I make the right choice. I know that you are the subject matter experts in this area. So I want to first ask you, how do you think we should solve this? And if needed, I'll make an ultimate decision, but I really think that you are the best minds to solve this and closest to the problem, and you can handle it. So that's kind of how I reframe it so that they don't think that I'm just like pushing it back onto them. It's more like, hey, I could make a more authoritative decision that might be totally short-sighted, but I respect that you probably know more than me based on the level of leadership you're at. So why don't you tell me what you think we should do? And then I can help us lead through that or remove barriers. All right. So the second thing you can do is move from task-based thinking to a strategic roadmap. If you listen to podcast episodes before, you know I've been talking about my project roadmap, my active project list. I live and die by this thing. Once I started setting strategy for my team, it was like clarity all the time. I felt like it was something we could always go back to when we were going through change and struggle and developing our culture. So many teams get stuck in reacting to tasks or things that just pop up instead of driving long-term strategy. And so as leaders, we must help our teams and ourselves remember the bigger picture and connect their work to a vision. So how you can build a system strategy and roadmap. Number one, create a clear roadmap defining big priorities for the year or quarter. Now, one of the episodes I want to do is about how February is a great time to set projects and roadmaps. Some of us might be feeling like, oh, January already happened, so I'm behind because I haven't set goals or anything like that. And let me just tell you, January can be a storm. It can be a month that sort of bubbles over with extended people out on vacation after the holidays, cleaning up from last year, performance reviews to do, like all the things just spill into January. February is fine. You are not behind. So you can still define big priorities for the year or quarter. Just start right now. Talk about this plan regularly. So I use my monthly meetings with my teams to review where we're at and what's next. Maybe you pick a different cadence. You can do this for yourself too. Schedule a check-in. January just ended, and yesterday I did a little reflection of my personal goals that I had for the year, and I have every intention of doing the same thing on Monday when I go back to work and reflecting on the professional accomplishments we had last year or last month and where we can go for the rest of the year. Number three, show progress visually. So you can use dashboards, project trackers like my project roadmap, active project list, or share milestone updates to show, okay, we're making progress. We were at point A and now we're at point B. People can really conceptualize like an actual road or path with pins in it, saying, like, okay, my little car starts at point A and we're going to be at point B by the end of this month. And our ultimate goal is point F, maybe. So we have all these little stops to make before we get to point F. We don't have to get from A to F right away. All we have to do is get to B or to C or to D, right? So kind of break it up into more manageable milestones and celebrate those. So people are like, okay, we did it. That was awesome. Number 4 is keeping everyone aligned and ask when you're going through those monthly meetings to review where you're at, say, does this align with the plan we've already agreed to? If something else comes up, like a task or a potential project in the middle of the year, that's the exact question that I ask my team if we're going to decide if we're going to do that thing. Because ultimately, we've decided we wanted to do something else. And if we make a change, that usually means we have to not do something we already decided to do. Or, hey, do we have time to fit this in? Does this thing actually align with our ultimate goal this year? And if it doesn't, we might have to say no or push back. If it does, okay, well, where are we going to find the bandwidth for that? It's got to be practical. If we're up in the clouds as leaders and we're like, that would be a really fun, shiny thing to do, I think we say yes to it. And the team's like, hold up, I'm on the floor, can't stand up, I need your help. You might say, wait, we need to pause. Maybe there's too much going on right now. Something has to change. So, practical steps is start each monthly meeting by showing what's been prioritized, what progress has been made. And before starting a new initiative, ask, does this fit into our strategic roadmap? If it doesn't, say no or push back. If it does, okay, what's got to give? Okay, number 3, knowing when to go deep and when to pull back. This is something I recently experienced because for the longest time, I had to make a big shift when I went from being the supervisor to the manager. So when I went from being supervisor to manager, I had to let go a lot and to allow the new leader in that role and other leaders in similar roles to do their jobs and to do it the way they want to do it. And so for so long, I was like, oh, I need to stop like inserting my opinion or voice. They've got it. Like kind of taking a step back and really stop doing their work and allowing them to do it and focus on my work. And it's just a big shift to make when you're so used to being in a specific role. And then you have to lead the person that's in the role that you used to have. It's such a big shift to be a peer who becomes a leader of a peer. And so for a long time, I really focused on like not getting into the weeds. But what I have learned is that strong leaders know when to dive into details and when to take a step back and let their team figure it out. So the key is really balancing strategic leadership with situational involvement. This is something I asked my VP about and I asked my leader recently about. Sometimes you need to know what's going on in a very detailed level so that you can help eliminate barriers, solve problems, or just understand at a very basic level what is happening. But 80-20 rule, the 80-20 rule is really helpful. As leaders, you want to spend 80% of your time on the high level strategy and 20% on deep diving problem solving. And you can also ask yourself, like, is this the best use of my time, or should I be coaching someone else to lead this? People might become uncomfortable if you're normally high level and then all of a sudden you ask and decide to deep dive. And I think, again, just like what I said earlier, you can just be intentional with your communication around this and say, hey, I do trust you all. And I need to know what's going on to help myself feel confident when I'm talking about this with other leaders or professionals or executives. And I right now don't have a great understanding based on the information I'm getting right now. So I just want to deep dive with you all for a little bit to dig in, make sure I feel comfortable with what's going on. And then I intend to get out of the weeds very quickly and let you all do your work. And so just again, just being very communicative about what you're doing and why you're doing it. If you're just diving deep to micromanage because you don't like the way someone's doing it, even though they're getting the outcome that's desired, maybe that's something you need to question and say, wait, maybe I don't need to be doing that. But if you're trying to learn to solve a problem, to give support, If there's escalations or issues going on, it's okay to deep dive for your understanding. Um, Also, if you have been in your role for a long time and there's a gap that you have and you want to deep dive, don't feel ashamed in that. I know I talk to leaders who sometimes will say, like, well, I've been in the role so long, like, I should know how this works. And I'll just want to say that as leaders and professionals, we often have to gloss over a lot of things because we don't have the capacity to operate at that level. We have to operate at different levels and we have our own work to do. So it's okay if things have been going maybe status quo for a while, things are not bubbling up to you, but then all of a sudden you have a need to understand something because it is being escalated. You can just say, like, hey, I've not had to really peek my head into this before, and now I'm going to, even though it's been a while. Help me understand. And just approach it with curiosity and without judgment. And I think you'll have a lot of respect for that. Number four is communicate directly and build a culture of empathy and transparency. So, culture change happens when people address issues head on, not through gossip, not through avoidance. Leaders must model direct communication and encourage their teams to talk to each other, not about each other. Uh, I've had this happen before where leaders will maybe not be happy with how someone else is handling something, or professionals unhappy with how someone is handling it. And I've had the reaction to be like, oh my gosh, okay, you need to go talk to that person. And that usually doesn't go over very well. What I realize is I don't want to be the in between middleman between adults that can work through a problem that really only exists between themselves. And so I think the first thing that I love to do to encourage a culture of empathy and transparency is to sort of redirect the person back and say, have you talked to them directly about this yet? And just normalizing these conversations. This isn't about going to tell mom or dad about someone else. This is about being an adult and having a conversation with another human being. I know people will get afraid of maybe retaliation or how someone else is going to handle the feedback or conversation. And so I am always happy to talk to people about how they would handle that conversation or what they might say to maybe disarm the person and make sure it's not a defensive um, conversation. So I'd love to coach on that. But I always like to say, like, I think you need to talk to the person first because most conflicts can be eliminated that way. Now, if it's more of a system issue, like a systemic issue that maybe the communication channels are broken or something like that, then you can get more involved. But I really think that teaching other people to just talk to others, to get to know them, to stand in their shoes for a day is so important. I just wanted to read my bullet points here to make sure I don't miss anything, but leaders must model direct communication and encourage their teams to talk to each other, not about each other. Balancing direct communication with empathy, here's a few things you can do. If you're having a hard time relating to someone's struggles or challenges, go spend time with them. It sounds obvious, right? This can apply to the person who's coming to you, asking a bunch of questions and saying you need to talk to this person, but it can also apply to you. If you're like, I can't really relate to why they are raising this issue or being so opinionated about this thing, just go spend some time with them. Hey, can I come see your reality? Can I come shadow you for a day? Can I come see your area? Can you show me what's going on rather than telling me? Standing in another person's day-to-day reality can transform the way you lead. I know for me, it really helps when I can actually picture somebody's workday in my mind. I'm like picturing their face and them sitting at their desk or their bench or wherever they're at. And I'm like, oh, yeah, that's their reality. Like, I'm like, oh, they're a human. We can really forget when we're working in big systems at computers that we're not just like digital nomads. We're actually people who are in front of other people and leaders and patients and physicians and other professionals we have to work with in real life. And those in person conversations can be difficult. So, showing someone that their work matters to you really builds trust and motivation to work together. So, some practical steps to review. Number one, next time a team member comes to you with a problem about somebody else, ask, have you talked to them directly about this yet? Normalize constructive conversations, feedback conversations instead of escalating issues too quickly. And if you're struggling to understand someone's perspective, go to their workplace, shadow them for a bit, and ask about their challenges. Number 5, humanize leadership. Be transparent about what you know and what you don't know. Leaders don't have to have all the answers. It's not your job. Your job is to guide, not to micromanage. So, something I love is this quote, "What do I know for sure?" And this is a quote of Cy Wakeman. It's part of her method to train your team to focus on facts over drama or emotions. And when my team is struggling with fear, or they're thinking that I maybe know something they don't know, or they are struggling to understand the why, I love to ask them, what do we know for sure? And this has them toggle up into a more curiosity mindset and really cuts through drama and helps focus on solutions. So, Cy tells this great story of how a nurse comes to the nurse manager and is like, "Oh my gosh, the ED is dumping patients on our floor. We're at max capacity and they just don't care how we feel. And we are so short staffed tonight. I don't know how we're going to take care of everybody." And the nurse manager is like, "Oh my gosh, the ED is literally dumping patients on our floor." And the nurse is like, "No, that's not what I mean. Like, they're just admitting and we have nowhere to put these patients and we don't have enough nurses for tonight." And the nurse manager cuts through the drama of that story and just says, "Oh, so you're here to tell me that we're short staffed, we're out of beds, and you're not sure how we're going to take care of all these patients in the next shift." And she's like, "Yeah." And the nurse manager is like, "Okay, well, those are 3 problems that I can work on." And the nurse is like, "Oh, yeah, that's why I came to escalate to you." She's like, "Okay, so it's not about the ED doing things to hurt us. It's about our capacity to do our job well and take care of patients." And the nurse is like, "Yeah." So sometimes we just get caught up in the spiral of a disaster or a fear or an emotion. And as leaders, we need to disarm everyone and be like, "Okay, let's just think facts over drama or emotions." So start your team meetings by asking, like, what do we know for sure? Cut that drama, focus on solutions. And also, as leaders, transparency matters. So I want us to make sure that we're owning our mistakes openly. When leaders admit that they're wrong, it creates a culture where people feel safe to grow. Obviously, we don't want to be wrong all the time, right? Because it's like maybe there's a competency issue there. But I think just to say, like, "Hey, like, I upon reflection, I think I would have done something differently. However, I think we did the best we could in that moment." Or, "Hey, this was a misstep on my end. I thought I could do more than I was capable of, and I have to step back and ask for help." Something like that. Just admitting, like, "Hey, I made the wrong decision. Here are the consequences, and now I just need to deal with that, and I'm going to take accountability for figuring that out." I think the humanization part of leadership with the drama piece and the being transparent about mistakes is just a testament to the fact that as leaders or high performing professionals, oftentimes people put us on a pedestal. I don't know, but something I've noticed is that people will just assume that I know a lot more than I do. And it's like, I think what I always remind myself is there's really no playbook for a lot of these situations that we deal with. It's really the experience and the resources and the questions that you ask that's going to help you find solutions and answers. And so a lot of times I'm figuring out what to do on the fly. And because I have to do this over and over and over, I don't really tend to panic when I don't know something. For a lot of people, this is very uncomfortable, and I didn't realize this. This is not maybe a natural way that most people like to live their lives. But if you've been in a leadership role for long enough, you know that there's definitely things you're like, "I have no idea. I'm just figuring it out as I go." And I think there's that balance between letting your team know, like, "I'm just figuring all this out. I'm a human," and saying, like, "Actually, I'm highly competent and I got this." And so that kind of plays into number 6, which is get out of your own head and to stop playing small. So I just want to share with you that leaders often hold themselves back due to imposter syndrome or self-doubt. And I think there are studies out there, don't quote me, but I've heard or read this somewhere that the highest performers are often the ones with the most self-doubt or imposter syndrome. So maybe that's a good sign. The more that you doubt yourself, probably the more kick-ass you are. But culture change starts with you. If you don't believe in yourself, how can you expect your team to think bigger, right? Chances are you are highly competent and people are looking to you for help, solutions, removing barriers, and just a little bit of confidence that everything is going to be okay. So if you are in the middle of the messy, you're micromanaging, you are trying to control, you're not really delegating, you're not extending trust, I just want you to take a step back. The next time you feel self doubt creeping in, ask, what evidence do I have that I'm not capable? Seek mentorship or leadership development to stretch your mindset. Look back at all the things that you've done that have been amazing, that you've done well, and keep those written somewhere, whether it's in like your book of wins or in an email folder to remind you. I will just share that over the last week, when I was dealing with the ransomware attack on our blood supplier, there were a couple comments that folks made that made me feel like they thought I was being like that I was incompetent. But it's funny, you'll notice as I'm saying this, like they said some things that then I thought they meant that I was incompetent. They never said that, right? So that was all in my head. And then I took some moments to gather myself to figure out what I wanted to do next. And then I executed on those actions. And then the very next day, I got three very nice messages saying like something to the effect of, wow, Kayla, thank you so much for your leadership. You remain calm, collected. If you're stressed, we never know it. Your leadership on this has been so helpful. You were empathetic. You helped us problem solve, and just you're an all around great human. And I was like, wow, yesterday I thought I was failing, when in reality, that's just a story I was telling myself. So stop playing small. Your team can smell it. Have confidence in yourself. You're doing amazing. All right, I know this episode is already pretty long, but part two of this episode is real leadership in action, my personal stories. And I just want to take 10 or 12 minutes. I don't know how long it's going to take to give you 4 examples of challenging situations that have had to sort of been propelling my team and myself towards a shifting our culture and changing on a large level, really some big changes. So number one, the computer upgrade challenge. I've talked about this before, but there's resistance, frustration, and a need to get my team to think bigger in some situations. And how I dealt with it was with direct communication and transparency to help shift the culture. The biggest thing was just instilling trust that we need to trust this process, that this is bigger than us, that we don't want to let temporary pain stop long-term progress, that, yeah, this is a pretty crappy situation, but how can we turn this into a positive one? In the face of something not fun, how can we be bigger and do what we need to fix the situation? So I think just asking those questions and reframing it, because people will get stuck into victim mode. The second example was the COVID-19 convalescent plasma crisis. So we had an urgency of getting convalescent plasma to patients, and we had to shift from overthinking to action. And the way that I led my team through this was just by asking, what do we know for sure? And this just really gave us the power of results driven, no drama mindset. It was like, can we do this thing? Bam. Can we do this thing? Bam. And before we knew it, it was like we had convalescent plasma and we were treating patients in the ICU. And it was just kind of a no nonsense approach. Nothing like during normal, quote unquote, normal times where we would have dragged our feet and said, oh, I don't know, it's not the best solution, or that's a little too complex of a workflow. It was just like a just do it mindset. This is more important than our immediate comfort zone. This is us getting uncomfortable to make something super important happen. The third example is of blood shortages and supply chain challenges. So we implemented standard work, which created stability during unpredictable shortages. So just knowing, when do we look at inventory? Do we have standard reports? Do we have a way for us to document current day's inventory? Do we have huddles we can attend daily to escalate? And was really finding the balance between going deep in the details and taking a step back. It was learning to extend trust in others and empower others, but also having sort of a plan in place where we could sort of go into any of the phases that we needed to deploy, but not doing it too soon. So I was really having to trust the voice of the leaders all over the system so I can make the most informed decisions. And then number 4, the ransomware attacks and the need for fast decision making. So there was chaos in the situation. And for me, I was never really worried about our blood supply because I knew that our local supplier had adequate blood. It was a matter of could they get that blood to us? And so my job, I felt, was just to stay calm because that was the thing that mattered most. Because at the end of the day, people were in fear. And this is when I asked that question, what do we know for sure? And what we knew for sure is that we were still getting blood when we ordered it. We still had plenty of blood in our organization, and that every day things got a little bit better. And after a day or two, we fully understood how to order blood, how to get everything we needed. And we had a plan for how to escalate problems. So really, it was like, what issues do we have? Not a whole lot. We definitely need to stay on top of it. Things could change any moment, but it really showed how the importance of transparent communication could keep people focused. And we got through it, and we're getting through it by focusing on reality and not fear. I really want to deep dive into how I handled cybersecurity issues with my organization in a separate episode because I think it'll be really helpful for all of us. So I'll definitely go into that once we're out of it. But I just wanted to mention sometimes changing the culture is elevating the mindset from victim or task motivated to solution focused, outcomes based leadership. Getting people from thinking small to thinking big. So, thank you so much for being here. I want to wrap this up and let you know how you can take action today. I want to remind you that culture change starts with how you show up every day. Here's a quick recap of the 6 strategies we talked about. Number 1, extend trust and empower others. Number 2, shift from task-based work to a strategic roadmap. Number 3, know when to go deep and when to pull back. Number 4, encourage direct communication with empathy. Stand in your team's shoes. Number 5, humanize leadership. Be transparent and lead with facts. Number 6, get out of your own head. Imposter syndrome kills innovation. And your call to action is try implementing one of these strategies this week. You can also read my blog post on Cy Wakeman's book with all the questions she asked, and one of them being, what do I know for sure? And then you can join the Get Organized at Work community for deeper leadership discussions like this. Inside the community, get the free resources. I have leader standard work templates, project management and roadmap templates in there for you. More coming soon. Subscribe, share, and leave a review on this episode if it helped you. All right, I will see you in the next episode. Thank you so much for listening. Take care.